The silent lament. The past. The praetor stood in the dim quiet of the Tacticae vault, gazing at the blankness of the sealed viewport. The shutter of gray adamantium remained locked in place, shielding mortal eyes from the roiling madness of the warp beyond. The Imperium's ships were engineered to endure many things, but the minds of their crews were not so easily armored. He breathed slowly, as if he could feel the demonic presence pressing against the hull, waiting for a crack. The Tactica vault was just off the bridge, a shielded chamber used for strategic councils and private command deliberations, away from the distractions of the command deck. Normally, Shipmaster Favonius Abutus used it as a personal wardroom, but now the praetor had claimed it. The walls were clad in dark wood paneling, reminiscent of ancient Terran sea vessels, a relic of old humanity, perhaps even of Terra itself. Among the room's sparse decorations sat a green avian on a brass perch. Whatever animal instinct it possessed, it served well enough. Every time the vessel entered the immaterium, the bird buried its beak in its wings, a single black eye peeking out in anxious watch. Kadon could relate. The praetor had been silent for some time, either weighing the conversation they just had, or simply contemplating the vast horror beyond the sealed hull. At last, he spoke. I knew the consul had brought prisoners aboard, but not why. Now you tell me one is a librarian. That clarifies some of it. A psyker is a weapon, Kadon observed grimly. A bound psyker is a grenade with a soul. We'll find out which in short order. The praetor exhaled, dragging his gaze away from the blank port, pressing his fingers into his temples. Adarati Lior will be one hell of a grenade, he muttered. Kadon shifted his weight, uneasy. He had hoped to avoid this confrontation, but rust spreads quickest when left unchecked. On Medusa, his father always said it was better to air grievance at the feasting board than wake with a blade in your gut. We follow you, my lord, Kadon said. His voice was low, firm. We followed you through the long war, across the stars, into the shadows, never once asking why. But now... He hesitated, choosing his words with care. Now the men need to understand. We abandoned the Legion to fight traitors, that was clear. But this errand into the black, chasing riddles? Though we trust you, trust alone is brittle in the dark. Doubt festers in silence. Speculation follows doubt. Then fear, and fear. He met the praetor's gaze. Fear makes men question their leaders. The praetor was motionless, his head resting in his hands, elbows on the command rail. When he spoke, it was barely more than a whisper. Let them doubt. It is kinder than the truth. Kadon's jaw tightened. Then give them something. The men can tolerate mystery. They can endure hardship, but not silence. And the consul, the seventh, never needed one. Now he appears, shadowed by 5 librarians, and we are expected to look the other way. Even iron breaks if forged too thin. He paused, then added, and the prisoners. The men whisper. I've walked the lower decks. They're unsettled. Fear creeps in like rust on a blade. I don't need to walk the decks, Kadon. That's why I have you. The praetor's voice was tired, not dismissive. He sat up, looking again at the sealed viewport. As for the prisoners, the consul believes they are the key to a very clever lock. He gave a short, mirthless breath that might have been a laugh. As riddles go, that one's oddly revealing. He reached for his helm. As for morale, speak with Carrion. Remind him of his oath. Patience will be rewarded, as will vengeance. The question had been coiled in his thoughts since the campaign's beginning. Why Carrion? The praetor turned to look at him, expression unreadable beneath the half-shadow. Your meaning? Why him for captain? He's not exactly typical of our kind. He wears his emotions openly. There isn't a stoic bolt in his metal frame. The praetor gave a slow nod, pensively flexing the fingers of his augmetic hand. Our brethren carry the burden more heavily than most, Kadon. We scorn the weakness of flesh. We replace it with steel. We remake ourselves in iron until we no longer bleed, or feel, or think like men. He paused, then placed his metal hand on Kadon's pauldron. But that is the lie we tell ourselves. We are not machines, we are men. And the failing of men is not weakness, it is humanity. We do not take on iron to escape mankind. We take it on to better defend it. He nodded toward the sealed vault door. I chose my captain not because he embodies the Legion's cold logic, but because he does not. The enemy expects machines when they face us. Unyielding logic. calculated attrition. I needed someone who breaks those expectations. Caden nodded, not entirely understanding, but beginning to grasp the edge of something deeper. The praetor let his gaze drop, his voice softening with a smile. "Do not misjudge Erastes Carrion, Caden Ferrisborn." He screamed into the void and returned. Caden rubbed a hand across his face, the cold bite of his own augmetics grounding him. The weight of it all pressed on him again. The betrayal of legions, the War Master's damnation, the hollowing truth that brothers had turned against brothers. He leaned back against a bookshelf, wood, real wood, possibly an antique. His eyes scanned the spines. De Bellis Stellarius, Dicta et Doctrinae, black-bound, with gold-leaf edging. Reliquia Navis, crimson, thick and battered. Catechismus Latisflamme, bound in old leather, the corner scarred with fire damage. He mused aloud. "You think a Buddhist actually reads these, or are they just for show?" The praetor affixed his helm with a hiss of maglocks. "I believe so. He wrote the last one." Before Caden could respond, the ship shuddered. A tremor passed through the deck plates, a vibration in the bones. The small green bird squawked from its perch and ducked its head once more beneath its wing. "Oh no," it said in a thin mimicry, just as the alarms began to chime. Real space translation was underway. The hatch hissed open, and they stepped onto the bridge as klaxons howled. The Lament of Desire translated into real space, the Geller fields cycling down with a distorted whine as the Materium reasserted its dominance. Across the vessel, warning runes flickered, and battle readiness prayers rolled from the deck vox. Shipmaster Favonius Abutus rose from his command throne with urgency, not panic. His voice measured. "Combat readiness protocols. All decks." The gunnery officer answered without hesitation. Torpedoes loaded and tubes voided, macro batteries charged and cycling, all lance turrets at full draw, except turret Anton. Motive force failure. It's locked to port, off by 0.15 degrees. From another station, Shield Overseer Torquemella responded in accented binaric, her Martian dialect not entirely masked. "Void shields raised, output stable at optimal. Baffle shielding reports a 0.2% decay per cycle, within acceptable tolerances." She stood to attention, the polished curve of her silver spinal augmetics glittering beneath crimson lumen light. "Engines at full power, thrusters cleared and refueled. Core batteries charged and stable, my lord," said Engineer Anatolus, fingers steepled beneath his chin. He reclined with calm poise, swiveling his brass-seated overseer's throne toward Abutus. The praetor and Caden advanced to the grand absidal viewport at the bridge's fore. The blast shutters were still retracting with the heavy grind of locking teeth. Caden's hand instinctively tightened around the grip of his holstered sidearm. Shipmaster Abutus surveyed the vast darkness before them. "The fleet?" he asked calmly. Fleet Vox Adjutant Davern Drosvik stepped forward, his tone unmistakably Medusan, a hauler royal by birth, and the accent lingered in every clipped syllable. "Steel Pinion maintains rearguard position, per your instruction. Lament of Helrius and Eternal Scion on our starboard flank. Scion reports failure of aft voids. Iron Priests are engaged in field repairs." "That will do, Mr. Drosvik. That will do." What lay before them was no battlefield. It was a slaughter. The remains of a once proud battle group drifted in ruins. Imperial vessels reduced to scrap and ash hung dead in the void. Some tumbled slowly, weeping trails of plasma and coolant. Others had gone cold entirely, their cores extinguished. Clouds of vaporized ceramite and shredded metal drifted like ghosts. Static storms skittered across cracked hulls. Vox echoes whispered broken litanies, snatched from ruined choir boxes. "Throne," murmured one of the junior officers, his auspex slate trembling in his gloved hands. This was a battle group. Dominating the void was the Sanctus Vult, or what remained of her. The battleship had been split along her spine, her midsection a fused ruin of molten adamantium. Lance fire had cored her like fruit, her gun decks exposed like shattered ribs, macro cannons locked in their final, impotent salvo. To port drifted a smaller escort frigate, Glory of Oriax, or at least part of her. Her prow was split, her hull open to the void, her name burned away save for the letter G and a few shredded sigils. Beyond them, fields of debris turned in tortured spirals around unseen gravitic wounds. Shredded gunship plating, twisted aquilae, augmetic limbs, and shattered helm lenses drifted in slow procession. Corpses spun, some still clad in navy blacks, visors cracked, expressions frozen in the instant of death, as if still giving orders when the void claimed them. Further off, 2 escort vessels had been cleaved in half, spilling their contents into the stars. What at first appeared to be ore spilled from shattered cargo holds, until the truth revealed itself. Thousands of Astra Militarum lay adrift, cast into the abyss. Rows of corpses tumbled, void frozen, their last guns still clenched in dead fingers. "Slow to 1/4 standard speed," ordered Abutus. "Let the repulsors keep the debris off our hull." "Aye, Lord," came the reply from the helm. The praetor stood in silence, eyes locked on the devastation. Cadon said nothing, his chest tight with anger. By the command throne, the consul watched impassively, green lenses glinting as he observed the carnage. "The Lament of Desire and her escorts stand ready, my lord," said Abutus, hands clasped behind his back. "Oh," came a voice thick with sarcasm. "Not skulking this time? Not afraid to fight for once?" Captain Erastes Carrion strode onto the bridge, his voice loud, his entrance as theatrical as ever. 5 of his company followed in void armor, eyes scanning for threat. Shipmaster Abutus turned, arms still folded. "Ah, you again. Tell me, how often did your mother drop you off the side of a sandcrawler? Was it a common event?" Carrion sneered. "Insult all you like, cur. If not for the situation, I'd have you chained and whipped around this ship until your tongue remembered respect. Shipmaster or not, remember your place." Abutus didn't flinch. He merely gestured to the field of ruin beyond the viewport. "This is a translation point. Those ships exited the immaterium and were ambushed before they could even raise their shields. As for our battle posture, a Dregraktun would have seen us translate. No point running dark. If any hunters remain, they already know we're here." Carrion blinked. "Dregraktun? Those are blind beasts. They live beneath the sand." Abutus gave him a flat look, as if addressing a particularly slow servitor. "More than once, then." He nodded with theatrical solemnity. "Your mother is to be commended." A few stifled chuckles echoed across the bridge. Even Carrion's own praetorian looked aside, unwilling to meet his eyes. The tension lifted, slightly. The praetor touched Abutus's arm, just briefly. The shipmaster nodded in return, no further words exchanged. Respect, hard-earned and silent. Kedon caught the consul watching, something like amusement dancing behind the emotionless lenses of his helm. He wondered not for the first time what the man thought of all this, or if he thought anything at all. Abutus turned back to the void, voice grim. "Poor bastards never stood a chance." "The War Master fights without honor," said Engine Seer Anatolis. "There is no honor in losing," replied Shield Overseer Torquemella coldly. "I don't see the War Master's ships floating in pieces." Cadon bristled, ready to reprimand her, but paused. She was not wrong. Cold logic, perhaps unbecoming in the moment, but not without truth. He remembered the praetor's words. The iron hands think like machines. He turned to look at Carrion. The captain stood still at the viewport's edge. His lip twitched. His breaths came slow but heavy, shoulders rising and falling with contained fury. He said nothing, but the rage in him was molten, tightly bound. The bridge fell silent. Reports continued in hushed tones. Men spoke only as duty required. A shattered hull drifted past. Even from here, Caden could see the hole torn in the gunnery deck. Servitors and gunners alike floated in the breach. One still clutching a munitions shell, as though carrying out his final order when the void came for him. Vox Adjutant Drosvik turned in his seat, voice steady. "Lord, I am receiving multiple distress calls from life pods across the debris field." Abutus gave a short nod, lips drawn tight in thought. For a moment, he said nothing, weighing the risk. Then, with a final nod to himself, he spoke. "Order the fleet to prepare for recovery. Inform the hangar crews to ready shuttles equipped with grav clamps and grapnels." The consul raised a hand, his voice flat and metallic. "They may be traps, Vox-lured proximity charges, primed to cripple." Drosvik turned back. "Negative, my lord, I'm on open Vox with survivors." "These are no thief transmissions or scrap code ghost echoes." "Nevertheless," the consul interrupted coldly, "we cannot delay our mission. Leave them." A hush fell across the bridge. The crew looked up. Expressions ranging from anger to disbelief. A few wore the pale neutrality of compliance. Others did not hide their disgust. Captain Erastus Carrion's voice cracked like a whip. "Leave loyal men to die in vacuum?" He turned. stepping down from the command dais. "These are servants of the Emperor." The consul did not flinch. His visor turned to Carrion, voice still calm. "What are a few lives gasping in the void compared to our objective? By all means, drop them supply pods. Perhaps a shuttle or two. You're welcome to volunteer, Centurion." Carrion stepped forward, fists clenched. "Leave men to die, Warp Tongue? Leave them to silence and frost? These are soldiers, Imperial soldiers." The consul tilted his head slightly. Loyalty to the Emperor now, is it? Or only when it suits your pride, Centurion?" Carrion's jaw locked. He turned to Abutus. "Deploy rescue craft. I will not leave Imperial lives adrift. Orders or not." "They are not your men," the consul said flatly. "They are Astra Militarum, cannon fodder, and any Astartes among them are not iron hands, so why should it matter?" Abutus stared at the consul in disbelief. The praetor moved beside Carrion, his tone firm. "I stand with the captain." He looked to Abutus. "We recover survivors." The consul's helm turned toward the praetor. "No, praetor, you will not. We have a mission, and your flesh must not yield to emotion. Now get us underway." A tense moment passed. Shipmaster Abutus looked from the consul to the crew, then gave a firm nod. "Begin retrieving survivors." The consul raised his hand. Abutus collapsed with a strangled cry, crashing to the deck, his back arched in agony as pain lanced through his nerves. His jaw clenched, but he did not scream. "The Emperor wills it, Shipmaster," the consul hissed, twisting his hand into a clenched fist. Abutus did scream then. "I hereby relieve you of command," the consul declared. "Torquemella, assume control of the bridge. Get us moving." The praetor's voice was steel. "No, I command this expedition." With a contemptuous flick of his wrist, the consul sent him flying. The praetor slammed into a bulkhead, armor groaning under the impact. He rose slowly, drawing his bolt pistol. But even as he did, the weapon trembled in his hand, unsteady, useless. The air thickened with the stink of ozone and burning incense. Caden saw sparks crackle around the weapon's casing. His commander could not lift the barrel. Carrion moved next. His pistol cleared its holster, but froze halfway up. His Praetorians surged forward, drawing weapons, but each was halted mid-step, locked in stasis fields, limbs trembling, frozen like statues mid-charge. Caden, flanking the consul, drew his own bolt pistol. He leveled it, but the trigger would not move. It was as if the metal had fused to itself. His finger flexed, no give. Around them, Void armsmen and crew stood stunned, a few slowly raising arms in defiance. Anatolis held a Serpenta. Torquemella and Drosvik had drawn auto-pistols. All frozen in tableau, a perfect still life of mutiny held at the edge of eruption. "As I said," the consul's voice echoed behind the visor, "we leave them." The bridge was silent. "Cadon," the praetor gasped, barely upright. Cadon activated his vox, shouting, "All Astartes, priority override!" But Static shrieked back at him. The transmission was dead. "Witch!" he roared, turning back to the consul. Then a sound pierced the silence, a laugh. Ragged, choked, but unmistakably a laugh. Abutus. The shipmaster's grin was feral as he rose to one knee, blood trailing from his lip. The consul tilted his helm. "I fail to see your amusement, shipmaster." "You wouldn't," Abutus rasped, raising a small device in a shaking hand. Wires snaked from the unit into his tunic. "When you informed me your guests needed shielding, I had the iron smiths construct a null chamber for your fellow librarians." The consul remained still, psychic force crackling around him. "Yes, it was adequate, quite comfortable for my brothers of the Librarius, but I fail to see your point." "I didn't know what you were bringing aboard," Abutus continued, grimacing. "Didn't trust it. So I took precautions. My men placed melta charges around the sphere. Don't worry, won't breach the Lament of Desire, but they'll slag your whole deck before you can blink." He smiled, teeth red with blood. "Oh, and just so you know," he tapped the wires, "they're keyed to my life signs." A long silence followed. Then, with slow, reluctant movement, the consul released the crew. Sidon felt the weight vanish. His finger found its freedom again. He did not fire. The consul inclined his head slightly. "Perhaps a rescue mission is in order, shipmaster. I'm sure it can be executed efficiently, with the Centurion and Praetor assisting." No one spoke. The Praetor stepped forward, helm cracked, green lens flickering. He stood before the consul a long moment, saying nothing. Then turned. "Begin recovery," he said, and the bridge exhaled again. Deck officers began relaying orders. Fleet Vox Adjutant Drosvik stood at his station, issuing commands to the 3 escort vessels to begin their own recovery procedures. The consul, after a moment of motionless silence, took a single step back, a subtle concession. But Kadon knew there would be a price. When word of this reached the Iron Thane, would he take action against the Praetor? Against Shipmaster Abutus? Or would they all be punished? Then again, when they returned to the Legion, would the Iron Thane even still be alive? Would any of his brothers, or would they have followed their Primarch into the abyss? The Praetor did not look at the consul. Instead, he turned to Captain Carrion. "Order your men to maintain security until we are underway." Carrion nodded, eyes lingering on the consul for a moment longer than necessary. There was fury behind that stoic mask, barely contained. He turned sharply and marched toward the hatch, his Praetorians following, all except 2. At a subtle hand signal, 2 of Carrion's warriors peeled off and took position on either side of the bridge, flanking the command throne. A clear message. The Praetor now required a guard, even on his own flagship. The Praetor turned to Xedon. "Inform Paulun to place guards on the shuttle bays. Every survivor is to be identified and screened. No surprises. Then signal Lieutenant Cerberus to deploy our Thunderhawks to assist the recovery. We don't want to take any longer than necessary." Kadon inclined his head and moved to relay the orders. Beyond the armor glass, flashes of light pierced the void as shuttle baffles ignited, cutting through the dark. Like fireflies against a dead sky, they arced toward the drifting wreckage, toward the scattered survivors. Shipmaster Abutus remained where he stood, arms folded behind his back, gazing through the thick crystal viewport. His posture was steady despite the pain. He bore no outward sign of injury, save for dried blood streaked through his short gray beard. Kadon remained near the Praetor, passing back reports from the Iron Hands recovery squads. Deck officers provided their own tallies, names, ranks, life signs, all reported to Abutus, who nodded but gave no verbal response. And the consul, still present, stood unmoving. The bridge crew avoided even looking at him, as if he were a weapon left on hair trigger. Finally, without preamble, the consul spoke. "I will be in conclave with my librarians." He turned to leave. The Praetor gave no reply, but Shipmaster Abutus did. "I don't care what you do with your witch's coven or how you conduct your search," he said coldly, "but endanger my ship again, and I will void you into the stars without a second's hesitation." The consul paused. He did not look back. Then, without a word, he walked off the bridge. The 2 Praetorians flanking the hatch kept their weapons lowered but ready, eyes tracking him until the blast doors slid shut behind him. Then they returned to their silent vigil, one on each side of the sealed entrance. The Praetor exhaled slowly and glanced at Abutus. "You could have told me you'd planted melta-charges around the null sphere." "I would have," Abutus replied, "if I had." He held up the small device in his hand. "This is a gravimetric meter." He smiled. The Praetor shook his head. "Remind me never to play cards with you." Abutus slid the device back into his tunic. "Gunnery Officer Stelvin," he called across the deck, "when you have time, place melta-charges around the null sphere chamber. Make sure they're easy to find." "Yes, Lord," Stelvin answered crisply. Abutus added, without looking up, "Then place more charges, well hidden, on all external hatches leading to the null sphere deck." Stelvin hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. "Understood, Lord." There was the faintest hint of a smile in his voice. Kadon and the Praetor exchanged a glance. Then they both turned back to the void. Outside, the first of the shuttles was returning, bearing the cold, bruised remnants of what had once been a fleet. The Lament of Desire moved its vast bulk through the drifting remains of the dead fleet. Its thrusters fired in controlled bursts as it carved a path toward the edge of the destruction zone, clearing a wake in readiness for warp translation. Steel Pinion held rear position, slipping along in the great battleship's baffles like a pilot fish trailing a void shark. Off at the far edge of the debris field, the battlecruiser Eternal Scion drifted as it took on the last of the rescue shuttles. Its smaller escort, the light cruiser Lament of Helrius, moved with haste, more maneuverable than her companion, cutting tight arcs and sharp burns to retrieve survivors quickly. And all the while, turning endlessly through the void, was the vast, twisted wreck of the Sanctus Vault. Her bladed prow, once the pride of her class, now cartwheeled slowly, the inertia of her death agony carrying her in a silent tumble. The force of her final moments had torn her open, shearing her down the spine, exposing dozens of hollow, lightless gun decks. Her torpedo bays were gaping black wounds in once golden plating. The proud Aquila carved into her prow, building-sized and bold, had been torn apart by plasma and lance fire, its beak shorn away, one wing melted into slag. The wreckage, silent and cold, was devoid of life signs or emissions. In her death, the Sanctus Vault had suffered a catastrophic chain reaction, detonating much of her internal munitions, leaving only a husk of twisted plating and exposed wiring. No one expected survivors. No one dared to search her. She was ignored by the Lament battle group, a corpse too far gone to disturb. But within her shadow, hidden amid the spinning field of debris, a shape lingered, blackened, silent, still. A void ship, heavy but sleek, cloaked to auspex by the dense metallic shrapnel and wreckage around it. Its form masked not only by visual obfuscation, clouds of vented gas and ice glittering in the light of distant stars, but by more subtle arts. Hollow emitters pulsed invisibly along its flanks, and auspex thieves, ancient, forbidden mechanicum relics, absorbed or falsified any scanning signals. What returned to friendly ships were ghost echoes and falsified telemetry. The hunter drifted, dead still, yet watching, ignored, unnoticed, and very, very patient. Drifting in the debris field beyond the wreck of the Sanctus Vault, Talon Centurion Raskarn rested his gauntleted hands on the gilded hilt of his blade, palms folded over to form a mocking, downward-facing Aquila. In the dimly lit bridge of the silent Lament, a drifting shadow slid across his ash-gray face, casting his sharply angled features into harsher relief. Of all his brothers, it was said he most closely resembled their gene-sire. The resemblance had been clearer before the centurion of the 13th Legion had shattered part of his jaw in a duel. A valuable lesson. Patience. Caution. In this too he mirrored their Primarch's temperament. His green eyes, long adapted to Nostromo's gloom, required no lumen to see the void beyond. Outside the viewport, Loyalist ships maneuvered cautiously through the wreckage-strewn debris field. He took a long, shallow breath, as if scenting prey. He imagined the smell: leather, gun oil, incense, fear, the tang of tech priest sanctity, acrid yellow. He could not yet smell them. Not across the void, but soon. Soon the hunt would begin. By his side, half a step above the command throne, another figure stood, motionless. Although directly visible, the man seemed cloaked in shifting shadows. His indigo-blue armor merged unnaturally with the darkness, and shadows seemed drawn to him, cloaking even the gentle glow of helm lenses and purity seals. The seals were not parchment. They were flayed skin, etched with binaric script, the language of the dark mechanicum. Still seated, Raskarn spoke without turning. "Are they aboard?" The bridge was silent. View screens were dark. Only the jammers, vox thieves, and hollow emitters hummed faintly. No servitors moved. No crewman dared breathe louder than necessary. The shadowed figure flexed the fingers of his power hammer. "They are aboard, Talon Centurion." His voice was clear, but its source indistinct, echoing from one end of the bridge to the other. The trick was unsettling, deliberate. His voice came through multiple vox feeds, alternating to give the impression he stood behind, beside, above, and below. Raskarn nodded faintly. "Any complications?" The figure, known only as the Dread Speaker, remained still, the shadows clinging tighter to his presence. "Nadrek was offended when I removed his hand," he said. This time his voice emanated from behind the communications pit. Raskarn gave the faintest smile. "Sacrifice is necessary. It had to look authentic. We only had 5 suits of 13 Legion plate, and one was missing a gauntlet." The Dread Speaker's voice now came from above. "I had to shoot Talakor too. His borrowed breastplate had a Volkite burn. He took it better than Nadrek." Then, from the rear gallery, "We still have a dozen iron hands chained to the outer hull. Perhaps it would have been better to use them in greater number." Raskarn's fingers shifted slightly on the blade hilt, the tip of the weapon gouging into the metal decking with a faint scrape. "A dish seasoned with the wrong flesh, Dreadspeaker. Had we used warriors of the 10th, the iron hands aboard the Loyalist ships would have recognized the markings. Even minor augmetic patterns would betray us. We lack the machine rights to mimic them perfectly." The dread speaker's helm tilted slightly, shadows bending with the motion. "I did not think of that, sire. My apologies." "Besides," Raskarn continued, "our cousins of the 13 are stiff-necked, aloof, and little known. Their behavior, different enough, helps mask any inconsistency. They'll pass for now." The dread speaker inclined his head. No reply was needed. Outside, the Loyalist ships realigned, preparing for translation into the warp. The wreckage field was vast. Jagged relics of the Battle of Pharaoh's 9 tumbled slowly through the void, battered by fire, void shock, and time. Talon Centurion Raskarn narrowed his eyes. They had discovered the Iron Hands flotilla days earlier, oddly detached from the larger Loyalist gathering at Eregius. Curious, he had chosen to shadow them rather than strike. The Silent Lament, a Night Lord's light cruiser designed for stealth and silence, had translated with them, dropping into the system just behind their baffles, cold running while the Loyalists brought their systems online. The battlefield they had found was a surprise to both sides. When the Iron Hands had halted to collect survivors from the drifting wrecks, the opportunity presented itself. 5 of Raskarn's warriors, clad in the armor of the 13, slipped aboard. The gods of the warp were generous, for those with the wit to seize their gifts. "Once they translate," Raskarn said quietly, "follow them. Do not be seen." His hands remained folded. The command throne creaked slightly as he leaned back, watching. The crew moved not at all. Each sat at their darkened station, fingers hovering over runes or resting lightly on touchscreens. All displays were blank. Only the rose-glass viewport shed dim luminescence. Some crewmen allowed themselves the smallest smile, the thrill of the hunt blooming in their blood. Others looked away from the overseers in their alcoves, fearful of drawing attention. One crewman, adjusting the resonance field for the passive scanner, drew his hand back quickly, then covertly touched a folded scrap tucked beneath his uniform. Faint moisture stained the edge. A page from the Lectitio Divinitatis. Hidden, treasonous. He placed both palms upon the control bar again, posture relaxed, duty visible, faith concealed. The Silent Lament translated in the wake of its prey, leaving the destroyed battle fleet to its silent void grave.